A crimson haze clung to the air above Mustafar, the molten river's roar a distant memory as Anakin Skywalker stood upon a shattered precipice. Flickering embers drifted through the ashen sky, each spark a silent gauge of the galaxy's altered fate. Once, only moments before, he had dueled his brother in spirit and blade. Now, the final echo of their clash lay dormant in the charred rock beneath his feet. In this moment of victory, there was no triumph, only a solemn reckoning. The bond between Padawan and Master reduced to embers. Obi-Wan Kenobi's body rested at the cliff's edge, an inert reminder of choices made in fury and betrayal. The steady hum of Anakin's lightsaber had snapped like a whip against his friend's defense, sending him teetering over the brink. Yet when the final strike came, it was not the glow of hatred that burned brightest, but a flicker of despair. As Obi-Wan tumbled toward the molten tide, his gaze locked with Anakin's, anguish and forgiveness shimmering in dulled eyes. That silent breath, suspended between life and flame, carried the weight of a million unspoken regrets. Now Anakin felt the chill of isolation more keenly than ever before. Without Obi-Wan's guiding presence, the world felt hollow, as though it had exhaled its breath in shock. His own breath came ragged, each inhalation tasting of sulfur and sorrow. The Force, once a symphony of shared power, had split in two. He closed his eyes, seeking the comfort of its currents, but found only a void. Overhead, molten spouts sprayed glowing rivulets across crumbling steps, reminding him that this place, this crucible of his destiny, had consumed everything he had cherished. Shadows stretched long across the crimson landscape, forming grotesque shapes that whispered of futures torn asunder. Anakin's armor, still stained with his master's blood, felt heavier than the weight of 10 starfields. He traced a gloved hand across his chest plate, where a fractured emblem reflected the last light of this dying world. Each dent and scorch mark told a story of obedience, of duty, and now of transgression. In the stillness that followed the storm of battle, he understood that no apology could ever mend the rift between him and the ideals he once held. A distant rumble signaled the approach of something greater than his own turmoil. Across the luminous expanse, a vessel's silhouette emerged against the boiling horizon. Emperor Palpatine had orchestrated this confrontation, and he would soon survey its outcome. Yet Anakin felt neither pride nor fear at the prospect of his master's return. Instead, he sensed the final remnants of his former self slipping away. The boy, who had once envisioned peace, now stood as a dark sentinel, an emissary of wrath forged in lava and betrayal. Above him, the sky fractured into molten veins, the air shimmering with scorched heat. The planet itself seemed to mourn, its lifeblood cascading into the abyss below. In that fleeting pause, Anakin allowed himself a moment of reflection. A memory of laughter shared under twin suns, of youthful hope kindled in council chambers, of promises whispered in the quiet of distant moons. All of it lay buried under the ashen tide, unreachable now except through the haze of memory. As the volcanic winds stirred ash across his shoulders, Anakin drawn a measured breath and straightened. The sorry remnants of Brotherhood flickered one last time before being consumed by the eternal fire. He turned away from the crater's edge, each step echoing on fractured stones. The path ahead was draped in darkest shadow, but he would walk it with purpose. For Obi-Wan's final gift, beyond his dying plea, was this: the catalyst that would forge Vader, a figure of unstoppable will, unbound by compassion, and yet forever haunted by its absence. The molten horizon beckoned, and with it, the promise of a destiny reborn. Anakin Skywalker, no longer child, no longer Jedi, raised his gaze toward the blackened sky. Behind him lay the ghosts of what could have been. Ahead, only the smoldering path he had chosen. And so, with the last whisper of Brotherhood fading into flame, he strode forward, alone but resolute. Soft thunder rolled across Mustafar's smoldering plains, but the storm was not of nature's making. A sleek shuttle pierced the ash-laden air, its engines hissing as it settled on the molten rock. The hatch opened with a hiss of hydraulics, revealing a figure cloaked in ebony, Emperor Palpatine himself, master of the dark currents. His silhouette stretched long across fractured basalt, merging with the planet's fiery veins. He came not to witness defeat, but to celebrate a new cornerstone of his dominion. Anakin Skywalker stood unmoving, a spectre amidst ruin. His armor, once scarred by betrayal's flame, now gleamed as though burnished anew. No prosthetics marked his limbs. Instead, flesh bore only the dusky sheen of sweat and ash. His chest rose and fell with measured calm, the red glow of still draining blood painted across stern features. Lightning arced overhead, illuminating the intricate fractures on his face, each a testament to the ferocity of his triumph. The final breath of his former life lingered in his eyes, a quiet promise of power unleashed. "Rise, my apprentice," Palpatine intoned, voice soaked in velvet malice. Beneath the hood, pale skin stretched tight, revealing a grin that sparked with savage delight. His outstretched hand beckoned Anakin, guiding him away from the creaking edges of oblivion. "You stand here unbroken, unmasked, whole as I intended." The wind carried distant echoes of incinerated metal, but between Sith Master and Sith Lord, silence held court. Anakin stepped forward, each boot imprinting the planet's crust, steam hissing where molten rock met cooling steel. He approached Palpatine, feeling the Emperor's malevolent aura enfold him like a cloak. No more needed the life-sustaining armor the old legend of Vader would have demanded. He had endured death's trial unscarred. In Palpatine's schemes, this whole disciple was the perfect weapon, untethered by prosthetic frailty, unbowed by loss. "I am yours," Anakin murmured, voice deep with resolve. "And the galaxy will tremble beneath our grasp." The Emperor's smile widened. He swept an arm toward the horizon, where the fires of Mustafar still danced. "Together, we shall forge an empire unlike any before. You will be the living embodiment of my will, unchecked, unrivaled." A bolt of thunder cracked overhead, as if answering his vow. Palpatine's staff, crowned with iridescent crystal, crackled with dark current. He tapped it twice against the ash, sending a tendril of power coursing through the ground. Nearby rocks shivered, splitting open to reveal glowing veins of molten fury. Anakin inhaled sharply, tasting ozone and iron. The Force thrummed through him, no longer balanced by compassion's pull or the Jedi's restraint. Instead, it surged wild, eager to obey every whisper of his dark heart. He raised a gauntleted hand, feeling the Force swirl like storm winds around scarred flesh. A spray of ash spiraled toward the shuttle's ramp, dancing in the charged air. "I feel it," he said, voice calm but loaded with menace. "The galaxy is ripe for conquest. We need only extend our reach." Palpatine nodded, his cloak settling like nightfall. Your first act as Sith Lord will set the tone for our reign." He gestured at a hollow projection floating nearby. Battle plans laid out in stark detail. Systems to subjugate, fleets to deploy, governors to install. Anakin's eyes glowed as he studied each node, every target marked in bright red. "These worlds will fall swiftly," he said, voice cold as obsidian. "And none will challenge the Emperor's new fist." In that moment, their destinies intertwined, master and apprentice, sovereign and blade. The lava flows beyond hissed in approval, and the shattered air quivered with anticipation. Mustafar, once a battlefield of sorrow, now bore witness to a far greater transformation. A Sith empire was born not from broken flesh, but from unyielding will. Its symbol, the figure who transcended death itself. Palpatine placed a hand on Anakin's shoulder, guiding him back toward the shuttle. "Come," he whispered, lips curling. "Let us bring order to a galaxy lost in chaos." As they ascended, each step carried hollow echoes, steps that would soon march across countless worlds. Lightning split the sky one final time, igniting the horizon as if heralding the dawn of a darker era. Above the crimson horizon, starships emerged from hyperspace, their hulls glinting against the ash clouds. Anakin turned his gaze upward, contemplating the path ahead. In that glance lay no regret, only the certainty of domination. Palpatine's return to the Republic's core, once his hidden refuge, would now be the stage for the final act. And at its center would stand the Dark Lord and his perfected blade, their shadows forever etched across the hearts of stars. A cold wind whistles through the scorched remnants of Dagobah's swamp, carrying faint echoes of hissing steam and distant thunder. Once a sanctuary of mist-wrapped jungles and hidden wisdom, the planet now bears the scars of relentless pursuit. An entire squadron of the 501st Legion kneels in formation, their white armor streaked with soot. At their forefront stands Darth Vader, unyielding as iron, his black cape brushing the ash-flecked ground. Vader surveys the ruins of a once vibrant forest where blaster bolts have seared through moss and lichen. Hollowed trees stand like shattered sentinels, their roots twisted by acidic pools. Above, the sky hangs low, tinted in sickly orange by distant fires. The coils of vapor rising from steaming marshes create ghostly shapes that vanish as quickly as they appear. Without a word, the Dark Lord raises his crimson blade. The hum flips to a menacing hiss, sending a tremor through the clones. Captain Jayon Var issues terse orders. Secure the perimeter, comb the southern mire, and report any signs of the exiled Jedi Master. Each trooper moves with mechanical precision, scanning the dim undergrowth, their EMF detectors crackling in the damp air. Vader steps forward, each footfall echoing like a death knell. He glides past charred stumps trailing shadow and dread. His breathing, amplified by his mask, is a steady drumbeat that drowns out the distant chirp of unseen creatures. He pauses at a cluster of smoldering roots, the scorched earth still smoking. Extending a gloved hand, he lets tendrils of the Force whisper through him, probing for vestiges of life. A tremor steals through the squad. Lieutenant Haro stumbles upon something half buried in mud, a small wooden carving, inscribed with knotwork symbols, unlike any the Empire has catalogued. It is the mark of a Jedi enclave, an artifact of compassion and guidance. Vader's gaze narrows. He snatches the relic with forceful fingers, examining its worn surface. "No place here for hope," he intones, voice rasping through the respirator. Clone troopers fan out into shadowed hollows, igniting scout lights that reveal tangled vines and glistening bog. They fire warning shots, single bursts that send plumes of mud flying. The red tracers arc overhead, burning streaks of menace into the gloom. But there is no reply, only the distant drip of water and the sigh of collapsed foliage. They press deeper, guided by faint echoes of a lingering presence. In a hollowed crater, they find footprints, three-toed, large, and the cavity of a campfire smothered with damp earth. Smoke coils from a single ember, the dying heartbeat of a refuge. Vader kneels beside it, pressing a finger to the stale ashes. "He was here," he declares, then crushes the ember with deliberate force. The 501st moves in tight formation toward a grove of moss-draped stones, the remains of an ancient shrine to the Force. Incense burners shattered, their oily residue mingling with the scent of brimstone. Vader stands before a carved relief, a diminutive figure wielding a staff, eyes closed in meditation. A memory flickers in his mind, bisexual lessons from his hidden days as Anakin Skywalker. He bends forward, the hiss of his saber now silent, letting the memory fade into the past. A sudden gust sends ash swirling, like an army of tiny specters dancing to an unseen drum. The clones raise their weapons, alert to any movement. Vader senses only calm, a void of life. He straightens, his presence a beacon of finality. "He will not return," he declares, rising like a monolithic statue. "We have burned his refuge. The galaxy's oldest hiding place lies in ruin." As the troopers gather around, Vader issues a final command. Collect every scrap of evidence, erase any hope that this world might still shelter the Jedi. Heavy boots plod across the swampy soil, carrying out his orders with ruthless efficiency. Each trooper tucks relics into data pouches, ready to deliver them to Imperial intelligence for study and for veneration as trophies of fear. When the purge is complete, Vader stands alone amidst smoldering ruin. The Force whispers faint regrets, but he lets them slip away. He turns toward the landing platform where his Star Destroyer waits, its hull reflecting the dying light of Dagobah's twin suns. Behind him, the forest grove smolders, its ancient wisdom extinguished beneath the march of Empire. A final burst of flame rips through the sky as Vader's ship lifts off, the roar echoing across the charred wetlands. The 501st watches in silent obedience, knowing their hunt is far from over. Somewhere, Yoda endures, slender traces of his will embedded in nature's fractured tapestry. But for now, the Empire's fist has fallen. The echo of the Jedi Purge will resound in every corner of the galaxy. Above the clouds, Vader's ship carves a path through smoldering haze, forging onward to the next hunting ground. In the darkness beyond Dagobah, the Emperor's new weapon glides, relentless and unshadowed by mercy. His vow of erasing the past, blazing like a star set to consume every glimmer of rebellion. The hunt continues. From the edge of Dagobah's mist-laced silence, the galaxy tilted permanently toward shadow. The dark figure who emerged unbroken from the crucible had become more than a warrior. He was now a symbol, a blade forged in betrayal, wielded by the hand of the Sith. As Vader's vessel disappeared into the stars, the galaxy beneath began to reshape, not with the slow erosion of ideals, but in the violent sweep of fire and steel. Above Coruscant, the world city once hailed as the heart of the Republic, skies turned to ash. From the Senate Dome to the Jedi Temple's ruins, the great skyline trembled as change thundered through its veins. Imperial banners, blood red and marked with the crest of a new order, unfurled like falling guillotines. Across 1,000 towers, holograms of the Emperor flickered into being. His voice cold, absolute, echoing through the streets. The Jedi have failed you. The Republic is dead. In its place, we bring peace through strength. Below, the streets once vibrant with culture and commerce now rang with boots and silence. Stormtroopers marched in locked cadence. Citizens kept to shadows, whispering in fear, their voices swallowed by surveillance drones drifting overhead. Propaganda bloomed like toxic flowers on every wall. Images of Darth Vader leading legions, his armor gleaming, his blade crimson. He was everywhere and nowhere, the fear in every silence, the final word in every command. The statues of Jedi Masters, Yoda, Windu, even younglings cast in memorial, were pulled from their pedestals. They crashed into the marble of Temple Plaza, cracking the very stones once laid in the name of peace. Children watched as the Order's legacy was ground into dust beneath tank treads and the Emperor's proclamation. This is not an end, it is a beginning. Palpatine's design, decades in the making, unfolded without resistance. The outer rim, long unruly, was brought to heel. Separatist remnants were hunted down and executed by Vader's Inquisitors, dark-eyed and cloaked, wielding crimson blades spun like wheels of flame. Planet by planet, the vision of the new empire stamped out the old symbols. Republic archives deleted, Jedi histories rewritten, truth turned to ash. Even the mid-rim, once loyal, was reshaped. Corellia's shipyards were militarized. Naboo's government dissolved. On Alderaan, pacifist protests were met with orbital threats, and under Vader's shadow, the royal court surrendered without a word. It was not just conquest. It was transformation. Each sector was stripped of identity and reforged beneath the obsidian seal of the Empire. And through it all, Vader remained silent, merciless. His presence became the black sun beneath which the new order rose. Unlike the Vader of our known history, wounded, slow, bound by a suit of suffering, this Vader moved with brutal precision. No chain hissed, no limb faltered. He was rage perfected, focused not by pain, but purpose. The Force obeyed him, as if it had no choice. Deep within the hollowed halls of the Jedi Temple, now repurposed into the Imperial Citadel, Palpatine stood before a new mural, one carved not in stone, but in the living Force. It showed the fall of the Jedi, the rise of Vader, the Empire crowned in eternal night. He placed his hand on its edge, a twisted parody of reverence. "It is done," he whispered. "The galaxy belongs to the Sith." But in the far reaches of the stars, amid debris fields and fading signals, faint whispers began to stir. Not every Jedi had fallen. Not every spark had gone out. The Force, wounded though it was, had not gone silent. Beneath the vast silence of Imperial rule, something waited. A breath, a tremor, a spark. Beneath Coruscant's burned orange horizon, a small shuttle detached from Vader's flagship, carrying a single, fragile cargo. Padmé Amidala, once laid to rest in the gentle embrace of twilight, had been salvaged from Mustafar's molten banks by clandestine orders of the Dark Lord himself. The pyre that had consumed her body in another timeline now served as proof of her rebirth, an imperial asset to be displayed, yet caged by invisible chains of sorrow. The chamber into which she was led glowed with a muted opulence. Obsidian floors ground to a mirror sheen, walls inlaid with crimson veining, and recessed lights tracing Gothic arches overhead. At its heart stood two thrones, one massive and black, draped in Vader's cloak, the other, a lean, sculpted seat of polished ebony awaiting the reluctant occupant. As Padmé entered, robes billowing like dark petals, countless holo-recorders clicked to life, capturing her first steps as Empress of a Sith empire. Her gown was cut from midnight silk, its collar high and severe, embroidered with the twin suns of Naboo, an echo of the world she once swore to protect. Every fold of fabric seemed weighed by a history that no amount of regalia could conceal. Her auburn hair, once woven into braids of state, now fell loose, framing a face marked by grief and unreadable resolve. Under a diadem fashioned from salvaged lightsaber crystals, her eyes remained veiled, pools of haunted regret that flickered with the memory of Anakin's embrace. Vader approached, his mechanized steps echoing through the hall. Where once he had reached for her with trembling hands, he now extended a gauntleted fist, an invitation rather than a plea. "Padmé," his voice rasped through the respirator, soft yet unyielding. "The galaxy kneels before our union. Stand with me." His silhouette, dark and towering, seemed to blur at the edges, as though caught between grief and dominion. She paused, fingertips brushing the armrest of her throne. The whisper of the Force stirred around her. Once, a gentle lullaby of life, now a mournful chord. Memories flooded in. The laughter of Naboo's meadows, the solemn promise they made by the lake, the warmth of a husband's hand before everything fractured. And yet, she rose, placing a slender hand upon the ivory-carved armrest, fulfilling a role she had neither chosen nor desired. As she seated herself, the assembled dignitaries, senators, governors, and former Jedi sympathizers now draped in imperial livery, bowed in unison. Their murmurs rippled across the chamber like a dark breeze. Each bowed head was a testament to her power, but also to the tragedy written in the lines of her face. Where hope once gleamed, a hollow firmness remained, as if her soul had been shaved to its essence. Palpatine's holographic visage shimmered into view above the dais, his gaunt features carved in shadowy relief. "Empress Amidala," he intoned, "your presence cements our dynasty. Together with Lord Vader, you shall guide this empire toward a future unburdened by fragile ideals." His voice, oily with promise, washed over the court. Padmé's lips parted in a silent acknowledgement, though her eyes never met the hologram's gaze. In the days that followed, she learned the rituals of power, overseeing war councils where fleets were dispatched to quell distant uprisings, signing edicts that dissolved planetary rights, and presiding over banquets where the screams of the oppressed were carried in coded transmissions. Each act felt like a blade sliding against her heart, necessary steps in a dance she had not choreographed. Yet in hidden moments, when the sun dipped low and the city fell silent, she would retreat to a balcony overlooking Coruscant's glittering sea. There, she allowed herself the luxury of tears, each drop a testament to lives lost, promises broken, and a love eclipsed by ambition. She traced the lights below, once beacons of her idealistic vision, now flickering candles at an imperial vigil. One evening, Vader joined her in quiet, offering no words. His presence was both comfort and reproach, a reminder that their paths were bound in tragedy. He placed a mechanical hand over hers. She did not pull away, for in shared silence they found a fleeting solace. two shattered souls forged anew by the same fire. In the grand tapestry of the Sith Empire, Padmé Amidala's thread shone with tragic brilliance. She was both consort and captive, a symbol of imperial might and human cost. Her reign would stand as a testament to the Empire's power and to the sorrow embedded in its foundation. And under the shroud of her veiled gaze, the galaxy watched and waited, uncertain whether to revere or to mourn the Empress who ruled beside a dark lord. A hush fell over Alderaan's hidden sanctums as two figures slipped through moonlit corridors, their footsteps muffled by worn tapestries. Bail Organa and Mon Mothma, once voices in galactic councils, now moved like phantoms, rebels in a world ruled by iron will. Their mission, to weave a network of dissent before darkness could snuff out every spark of resistance. In a private chamber, Bail unfurled a set of stolen schematics, blueprints for a communications grid capable of evading Imperial sensors. Paper-thin lines traced the routes of hyperspace lanes, linking safe havens from core to outer rim. Mon Mothma's finger hovered over a hidden sector on a star chart. "The people of Bothawui and Ryloth are ripe for aid," she whispered, voice steady despite the stakes. "If we can secure their support, we ignite hope." Their operative, a former naval pilot named Kel Tian, brought encrypted hollow transmissions. He keyed in a code sequence, symbols rippling like tiny auroras across the projector. "These messages will bind us," he said. "Each signal carries our declaration of unity, ready to trigger in the darkest hour." The chamber's lights dimmed as the projector hummed, casting shifting patterns on stone walls etched with ancestral motifs. Across the galaxy, in the underbelly of Ord Mantell, sympathizers gathered in shuttered warehouses. Smugglers delivered compressed datapads, each containing fragments of Bail and Mon's manifesto. Words of defiance sparked covert conversations. A merchant captain hid a transmission crystal in a cargo of Mandalorian steel. A Twi'lek dancer passed a microdatapad in the folds of her skirt. Every gesture carried peril and promise. Mon Mothma oversaw a small squad of technicians assembling a makeshift relay station in a disused asteroid mining shaft. Dust motes hung like drifting stars as they soldered transceivers to jagged rock. "When the Empire's eyes turn elsewhere," she murmured, "our messages will flicker to life, guiding stranded souls toward us." Sparks flew as a weld ignited, illuminating her determined face with golden flecks. Meanwhile, Bail recruited former Clone Wars veterans whose scars bore witness to betrayal. In a subterranean hangar on Sulust, they modified old starfighters into stealth escorts. Engines were silenced, hulls repainted in muted greys. A single call sign would bind these pilots together: Phoenix. Each ship would rise from ruin, defying the Empire's chokehold on the skies. Far beyond, on the desert moons of Tatooine, exiled nobles financed safe passages for defectors. A hidden helix of cannons and fuel caches formed a lifeline, ensuring that any senator or Jedi sympathizer fleeing the Purge could slip through the sands at dusk. Their code name, Desert Star. Droids calibrated navicomputers to read secret sandstorm patterns, masking every escape. Back on Alderaan, Mon Mothma and Bail convened beneath a crystal dome. Leia Organa, barely a child, watched from the shadows. She sensed the tremor of destinies converging. "When you speak," Leia whispered, "even the stars listen." Mon Mothma placed a hand on her shoulder. "One day, Leia, you'll carry this torch further than we ever could." The girl's eyes burned with a promise older than any Senate decree. plans crystallized. Each cell would activate when the Empire's yoke grew heaviest. A hidden code broadcast would ignite raids on garrisons, sabotage fuel depots, and liberate prisons. The bonds between worlds, ephemeral now, would harden into an unbreakable chain. The galaxy would stir, unfurling like dawn across a blood-streaked horizon. Yet every heartbeat of hope carried risk. Imperial agents lurked in every port. Whispered betrayals, turned captains, and masked inquisitors could snuff out this fragile uprising. Bail tapped his holocron, projecting a list of known sympathizers. Every name was a life balanced on a razor's edge. "Trust must be our currency," he said, "and caution our companion." Night fell, and the chamber's secrets dissolved into darkness. Mon Mothma closed the holoprojector, leaving only the faint hum of dormant transmissions. Bail draped a cloak over Mon's shoulders. "Tomorrow," he vowed, "we light the first fire." Outside, twin moons shone coldly, reflecting the weight of the path they had chosen. As the two patriots slipped into the night, entire worlds trembled with the promise of rebellion. In silent cells and hidden starports, the seeds sown by Bail and Mon would sprout. From stolen blueprints to encrypted calls, the first embers of insurgency glowed against the Imperial dark, a covenant of defiance that would one day blaze into a galaxy-shaping inferno. Where rebellion stirs in hidden warrens, a darker spectre dominates the open skies. As whispered networks kindled hope, Darth Vader's fleet carved swaths of dread across star systems once thought secure. His shadow stretched from core worlds to outer rim fringes, an unbreakable fist sweeping aside any spark of defiance. On Nar Shaddaa, landing crafts disgorged squads of black-clad stormtroopers beneath neon labyrinths. Corporate towers shuddered under orbital bombardment, their reinforced shields buckling in arcs of blue-white energy. Citizens bolted doors, voices hushed into panicked silence as Vader's helmets reflected the city's dying glow. The message was clear: submission or oblivion. Beyond the smog-choked alleyways, star destroyers assembled into vast armadas. Their angular hulls blotted out dual suns, plunging entire sectors into twilight. On command bridges, officers monitored planetary shield generators, their monitors flickering red whenever the Emperor's enforcers released volleys of concussion missiles. Each explosion cracked armor plating and sent shockwaves rippling through the atmosphere. At a remote listening post on the moon Belsavis, rebellion scouts intercepted Imperial transmissions. They heard Vader's calm voice over the comm channels. "Deploy walker squads on the eastern continent. Level every main settlement." Static followed his orders, ensuring no plea for mercy would interfere. Within hours, mechanized feet ground fields to dust. Once thriving ports lay buried beneath rubble. On Salukami, aquatic cities fell to orbital cannons. Biodomes shattered, foam-drifting waters boiled into steaming mists. Rebel sympathizers who had sheltered refugees found their havens reduced to skeleton frameworks. Those who survived emerged into rain-slicked streets, where Vader's Inquisitors, clad in onyx robes, brandished red blades to enforce silent compliance. Even the temperate core world of Chandrila, home to Mon Mothma's ancestral line, could not escape his grip. Warships blockaded orbit, cutting off supplies and communication channels. Senatorial estates fell under curfew, and loyalists were spirited away to secret detention centers. When planetary shields failed under concentrated fire, Vader himself descended in his TIE Advanced, the distinctive roar of its engines echoing like a beast's growl. Yet in the choking grip of fear, something remarkable took root. The crushing weight of imperial power inspired rare moments of unity among terrified populations. On Lothal, refugees whispered of hidden training enclaves. On Dantooine, monks slipped secret communiques into saberless hands. Far-flung colonies, once indifferent to galactic politics, now trembled at a common threat. The Empire's iron heel had inadvertently forged bonds stronger than steel. Inside Vader's flagship, the Executor, the Dark Lord watched these planetary dramas through a kaleidoscope of hollow readouts. His mechanical breathing filled the star-silent corridors as he observed shields flicker and die. Each world subdued was another step toward extinguishing rebellion's final embers. Yet in the undercurrent of his calculations, a thread of unease woven by the Force teased at his consciousness, suggesting that even absolute dominance might falter. Amid this tide of conquest, isolated pockets of resistance dared to strike. In a ruined hangar on Tanab, a handful of insurgents sabotaged an Imperial dreadnought's reactor. Flames roared like a primal cry as the ship's hull shuddered. Though the station fell into chaos, the cost was great. Dozens of rebels burned, their sacrifice marking another tragic footnote in this galaxy-wide nightmare. Word of the blaze reached Vader through Imperial channels. He tilted his helm toward the display, amber optics narrowing. "Search every system for that spark," he commanded. "Eradicate it before it ignites elsewhere." His voice held no fury, only the cold precision of a predator eliminating its prey. In the hushed aftermath, worlds lined up in obedient ranks. Trading routes reopened under Imperial oversight. Governors pledged loyalty before trembling crowds. Victory parades, rarefied, silent affairs, lined main plazas with propaganda banners. Yet beneath the veneer of order, fear festered like a toxin. People spoke only in whispers, and eyes darted at every shadow. And so, as the Empire's dominion tightened like a coil, the seeds sown by Bail Organa and Mon Mothma took deeper root. In the silent corners of shattered cities, messages scrawled in hidden scripts kept hope alive. The galaxy remembers. We endure. Forces of oppression could scorch planets and silence parliaments. But the human spirit, resilient as star-forged metal, found ways to kindle light in the darkest night. The Empire had stamped out countless flames, yet with each act of brutality, a new ember glimmered in secret. Vader's triumph felt inevitable under his vast armada, but across the stars, hushed alliances formed in the ashes. The Age of Fear was both a triumph and a struggle, an epoch where tyranny reigned, yet the promise of rebellion still whispered on the solar winds. But even in the cold rain of fear, one thread unraveled in silence, hidden, precious and forbidden. The Emperor believed all threats had been extinguished. He believed Padmé Naberi had broken beneath the weight of her new crown, made pliant by grief, molded by power. But a mother's heart is not so easily shaped. Beneath her porcelain composure and the silence of courtly obedience, Padmé cradled a truth neither Sidious nor Vader would ever know. She had survived Mustafar, yes, but more than that, she had endured. And in the hollow core of the great imperial palace, surrounded by the machinery of tyranny and draped in regalia she never asked for, Padmé gave birth to twins. Born not in fire like their father, but in the stillness between breaths. A hidden midwife, loyal to Alderaan, whispered a name with the rising of the first. Leia. The second cried out beneath starlight veiled behind windowed steel, his voice sharp, bright, unafraid. Luke. Padmé held them only for moments, but in that brief forever, her eyes memorized every line of their faces, their light, their promise. She knew Anakin would search for them if he knew, not out of love, but need. The children were power incarnate, and in Sidious's grasp, they would be sharpened into weapons, extensions of the Sith's dominion. She would not let that happen. So began the deception, the quiet severing of what remained of her soul. Bail Organa, still masked by his political survival, arranged the plan in whispers behind closed transmission loops. Obi-Wan, whose name was now forbidden in the Senate, emerged briefly from exile like a ghost out of legend, not to claim vengeance, but to shield innocence. It was he who carried the boy. A cloaked figure, wind-scoured and silent, disembarked under twin suns. No title, no pride, no lightsaber at his hip, just a bundle wrapped in linen and destiny. He walked the scorched flats of Tatooine, where memories clung like ash, and left the child with Owen Lars, the last of Anakin's kin, bound by blood, hardened by sand. As the suns began to rise, Obi-Wan stood a long moment on the ridge, his silhouette cut sharp against the golden dawn. No words, only watching. Then, like vapor under heat, he disappeared into the dunes. Leia's path was gentler in image, but no less heavy in consequence. Bail and Breha Organa brought her to Alderaan, where stars bloomed in gardens and democracy lingered as a ghost of nobler times. She grew under chandeliers and philosophies, schooled in languages and statecraft. But even as she learned to bow and lead, the Force stirred within her like moonlight under waves. Gentle, unseen, persistent. Padmé, still cloaked in imperial silk, never saw them again. She dared not. Too many eyes, too many whispers. But in her private chambers, she kept 2 tiny garments folded beneath stone and song. And every night, she stared at a flickering star beyond the galactic rim and whispered 2 names into the silence. Luke, Leia. Elsewhere, the Emperor grew suspicious. He had felt a ripple when she delivered, a disturbance, faint and brief. But Vader had sensed nothing, too distracted by conquest and the relentless hum of duty. Still, Sidious ordered quiet investigations, interrogations, data sweeps. Midwife records vanished, anyone who may have spoken out, silenced. But the trail remained cold. The Force, ever a river of mystery, cloaked the children in veils the Sith could not pierce. It hid their signatures, concealed their futures, shuffled their fates. Years passed. Vader, when he stood upon high bridges staring into star-streaked voids, sometimes heard echoes in the silence. A phantom heartbeat, a child's cry that never existed. He told himself it was memory, nothing more. That the past had been buried beneath ash and steel. But the Force remembers. And so, the galaxy spun onward. One twin beneath the scorched bones of a desert world, watched by a fallen knight. The other among clouded palaces, prepared in secret to one day lead. Each unaware of the other. Each born of hope and flame. And somewhere, deep beneath the Empire's iron rhythm, the echo of prophecy stirred, even as the darkness stretched its claws across the galaxy, in the quiet places, where the stars whispered and time moved like breath through leaves. Something ancient stirred. The Jedi Order had been shattered, its temples burned, its knowledge scattered to the void. Statues of masters once revered now lay crushed beneath imperial march, forgotten by all but the winds. But not every ember had gone cold. Far beyond the galactic center, where the sensors of the Empire failed and maps ended in silence, the swamp world of Dagobah brooded beneath a ceaseless fog. Life here pulsed in primal rhythms, thick with creatures both gentle and cruel, trees gnarled with age, and waters that whispered in tongues long dead. And hidden deep within the cradle of this world was Yoda, once Grand Master of the Jedi, now a shadow among shadows. He had fled here after the fall, not in cowardice, but in wisdom, for he had seen that battle would not bring balance, that to rise again, the Jedi would need more than sabers and sermons. They would need time. They would need hope. The exile had aged him, not in body, for his years had always been many, but in spirit. He no longer walked with the proud cadence of a general, but with the quiet gravity of a monk. Here he listened more than he spoke, learned more than he taught. The Force flowed thick on Dagobah, like mist between roots, and in its rhythm, Yoda found something deeper than doctrine. He spoke to no one, but the world listened. Still, he was not alone in purpose. In the ashes of rebellion, a flicker endured, faint, young, and far away. A boy, the son of Skywalker, hidden, growing. And when the time came, the Force would bring him here, to this place beyond reach. But it was not just the boy the Force guarded. Across distant moons and broken colonies, other survivors lived, each haunted, scattered, trembling. A few still dared to ignite their sabers in secret. One among them, older than the rest, sought not vengeance, but meaning. His name lost to codes and whispers, he wandered from ruin to ruin, collecting fragments, holocrons, teachings, crystals that still hummed with forgotten light. And eventually, drawn by instinct and visions, he came to Dagobah. Yoda met him in silence. They spoke not as master and student, but as pilgrims, each carrying the weight of extinction. The man, scarred by failure but unbent by time, knelt before the ancient Jedi, not for lessons in combat, but in survival, in faith, in purpose, beyond war. Yoda led him into the heart of the swamp, to a cave veiled by the Force. Its walls breathed with old memories. Etched in trembling lines were teachings from ages past, warnings, wisdom, visions. Some drove the mind to madness, others clarified the soul. There, in flickering torchlight, the man rebuilt his connection, not with vengeance, but with surrender. His saber, shattered since the purge, was reforged by hand, crystal aligned with purpose. When it hummed again, it did so not in anger, but in stillness, a blue blade flickering in the dark. The Force had not abandoned them. It had merely waited, but the galaxy did not. The hunt for Jedi never ceased. Vader's Inquisitors scoured systems, following rumors like wolves to scent. They sensed tremors now and then, brief flares of light in the Force, and descended with ruthless precision. Some survivors fell, others vanished deeper into the unknown. A few joined the dark. But this man did not run. Not anymore. He carried the blade, now not as a symbol of war, but as a promise. That should the time come, should the child of Skywalker rise, there would be at least one Jedi left to guide him, And Yoda, ever the watcher, knew his own time was drawing near. Not for battle, but for passing. The tree does not fear the wind when its seeds have taken root. So he waited and trained and whispered into the fog. One day, the child would come. One day, the Force would rise again. And until that day, the light would endure, not in fire, but in the steady flame of those who remembered. And as the last Jedi vanished into exile or silence, the vacuum left behind did not remain empty for long. The Empire, ever watchful, ever hungering, turned its gaze inward to the twisted remnants of Force sensitivity that could be shaped not into guardians, but into hounds. They were not Sith, not in name. That title remained sacred, reserved for only two. But beneath Vader's cold, watchful presence, another force was sculpted from pain, fear, and broken oaths. They were called Inquisitors. Their leader, once a child stolen from a forgotten world, trained briefly in the halls of the Jedi before the Purge, now bore no name, only a rank. The first Inquisitor, a figure forged in fire and betrayal, her saber now spun with rage, not justice. Her face, marked by ancient scars and fresh wounds alike, hid no remorse, only the cold satisfaction of survival. Vader had found her in the ruins of a forgotten temple, where she had once buried her lightsaber beneath the stones, hoping to erase her past. He unearthed her, not to punish her failure, but to nurture it, to turn her grief into focus, her confusion into obedience. He did not teach her the ways of the Sith. He taught her how to hunt, and so she learned. How to track the echoes of a Jedi's presence in the Force. How to read fear in the lines of a refugee's eyes. How to twist truth until even hope sounded like treason. She trained others, hand-picked from orphans, traitors, and the broken. They came willingly or were broken until they did. Clad in black and crimson, cloaked in fear and cruelty, they became the Inquisitorious, extensions of Vader's will. Temple ruins across the outer rim trembled beneath their boots. Old sanctuaries, once hidden behind forests or within mountains, were laid bare by fire and blade. Crimson moons cast their light on fallen spires as the Inquisitors tore through stone and secrecy alike, seeking ancient holocrons, surviving masters, and Force-sensitive children. They showed no mercy. And behind every operation, sometimes watching from the shadows, sometimes leading the charge, was the first Inquisitor. Her presence spread like a red mist across the stars, her methods spoken of in hushed warnings. Entire sectors fell silent after her arrival, but for all her might, her gaze constantly turned toward one elusive figure, Kenobi. The name echoed in her master's mind, Anakin's lingering wound. Vader had not spoken it aloud since Mustafar, but she could feel it when he stood still, when his breath halted just for a moment longer than usual. Kenobi had not died. Vader knew, and if he lived, he was the final tether to a past the Dark Lord had not fully severed. Thus, the first Inquisitor hunted him not just for glory, but to finally give her master peace. Or so she believed. She scoured systems where whispers spoke of a desert hermit, of a blade ignited in defense of farmers, of a cloaked man who vanished with the twin suns. Each rumor brought only sand and silence. But she remained relentless. The dark side fed on her obsession. Her sleep was haunted not by guilt, but by Vader's voice, calm, commanding, relentless. You will find him. She burned through dozens of worlds. Each Jedi corpse added to her confidence. Each child taken to the fortress Inquisitorius deepened her faith in the cause. And still, she wondered, did Kenobi flee? Or was he waiting? The galaxy trembled in the wake of her hunts. Parents hid their children when the Empire's ships arrived. Some resisted. Most died. And yet in quiet places, fires were kindled anew. For the more she hunted, the more the hunted united. From the ashes of destroyed temples, survivors found each other. Not just Jedi, but teachers, healers, pilots, smugglers who once watched the Republic fall. They began to whisper of rebellion, not just against the Empire, but against the Inquisition. And somewhere far away, in the dunes of a familiar world, a weary figure watched from afar, hidden but not blind. Kenobi remained, waiting, watching, and when the time came, he too would rise. The stars had grown quiet in the years since the flames of war licked through the galaxy's spine. Yet in the stillness, in the deep hush between constellations, something began to stir, soft as a breath, bright as a spark. Far from the seat of the Empire's power, hidden beneath sandstorms and canopy-shrouded hills, two lives unfolded like stories penned by fate's invisible hand. One beneath the harsh twin suns of Tatooine, the other among the whispering forests of Alderaan. Luke Skywalker, a boy of wind-burnt cheeks and calloused palms, raced the dunes with questions in his chest. He felt it in the wind, in the pull between stars, in the moments just before waking. Something vast, something waiting. He could not name it, but it echoed in his bones. Leia Organa, luminous and poised, walked palace halls draped in velvet silence. Daughter of a senator, voice sharp as starlight, she stood in chambered courts with fire behind her gaze. Yet in dreams, she wandered other paths, foreign faces, a man wrapped in shadow, twin stars bleeding light, and always the sound of a heartbeat not her own. They did not know each other's names, not yet, but the Force knew, and the Force remembered. As Padmé Amidala passed through her palace in mourning robes of regal black, she paused longer at windows that framed Alderaan's golden sky. Her eyes, still veiled in sorrow, caught the way Leia tilted her head, just so, when watching the horizon, as if listening for something far away. It stirred an ache too deep for language. And on Tatooine, Obi-Wan Kenobi, older now and dimmed by exile, watched the boy grow. At night, from a lonely outcropping of stone, he watched the Lars homestead flicker in firelight. Luke, so much like Anakin before the fall, restless, bold, always reaching, and yet not the same. Softer, warmer. The darkness had not touched him. Not yet. There were days when Luke would stare into the sunset, the twin stars gilding his face with molten gold, and feel as though someone far away stared back. A flicker of knowing, of kinship. It passed like a ghost, but it returned again and again. In the space between planets, the Force stretched like a whispering tide. It did not shout. It waited. It called. Leia, on Alderaan, wandered into the Senate chambers when they were empty, drawn to the echoes. She placed her hand on the cold durasteel of the speaker's dais and closed her eyes. She felt something. A hum. A promise. On the other side of the stars, Luke touched the hilt of a training staff fashioned from scrap and felt a jolt through his fingers, like heat without fire. His uncle scolded him for lingering too long near the old vaporators, for asking too many questions about starships and battles. But the boy could not be uncurious, not when the wind itself seemed to speak in riddles. And in the dark reaches of the galaxy, where Sidious's reach grew ever longer, the tremor did not go unnoticed. The Emperor sat in the stillness of his obsidian throne, eyes half closed, fingers folded like talons. Something had shifted. A breath had returned to the Force, faint but insistent. Hope had found root again, in soil he thought scorched forever. "Children," he rasped, as if tasting the word. "Too early." Vader, silent at his side, said nothing. But within the mask, beneath the iron voice, Anakin's remnants stirred. An echo, a heartbeat remembered. Somewhere, something was waking. In dreams, Luke saw a figure wreathed in smoke, reaching toward him. In hers, Leia saw the same. Each reached back, never touching. But the distance was growing smaller, and so the stars began to whisper again. The Force, once silenced, now hummed like the edge of a storm. The children had not yet met, but blood called to blood, threads of light pulling across the dark. The galaxy turned as it always had, but this time, destiny tilted with it. The galaxy held its breath. From the cold steel veins of the Executor to the deep core worlds long silenced beneath Imperial banners, an unseen tremor passed through the Force. A change, subtle but thunderous. The stars, ancient and watchful, bore witness to a single moment where light might have risen, but did not. Above the gas giant of Bespin, lightning threaded the clouds like cracking glass. Wind howled through the metal guts of Cloud City, a dirge echoing through the storm-choked corridors. At the platform's edge, Luke Skywalker stood battered, bloodied, and broken, his breath ragged, his face drawn with disbelief. The words still rang in the air, impossibly true. "I am your father." It was not a lie, not a manipulation, not a trick of the dark side. And for the first time, Luke saw the eyes behind the mask, not just the Sith Lord, not merely the monster whispered of in rebel camps, but a man, ruined and reaching. He'd felt it too, hadn't he? That strange gravity between them since their sabers first clashed. Familiar, terrible, undeniable. The Force did not lie, not in this, not when blood cried out to blood. The choice yawned before him like the abyss. "I will never join you," he had whispered moments ago, clinging to defiance, to hope, to the teachings of a Jedi Master long vanished into the mists of Dagobah. But that name, Father, had changed everything. The ground of his soul shifted, the certainty crumbled. Now Vader stood with hand extended, not in threat, but invitation, a promise. Together, we can end this destructive conflict, bring order to the galaxy. Not chaos, not conquest. Order, peace, perhaps even justice. With the rebellion broken, with the Emperor displaced, could they truly rebuild? Luke's gaze fell to the space where his right hand had been. Gone, severed by the very man who now beckoned him. But in the storm, pain blurred with revelation. The loss had carved away illusion. Obi-Wan had hidden the truth. Yoda, too. And in their silence, in their dogmatic shadows, he had walked blind. He reached out, There was no dramatic music, no burst of light or fury, only a silence so deep it seemed to swallow time. His fingers met his father's. A quiet click echoed as their hands clasped, flesh to machine. Vader did not speak. The storm spoke for them. The Empire had gained a prince. Side by side, they descended through the clashing winds of Bespin, aboard the dark-winged shuttle that cut through the clouds like a blade. None spoke as they passed the carbonite chamber. The rebels had escaped. It no longer mattered, for Palpatine would not rule alone much longer. On Coruscant, beneath the jagged spires of the Imperial Palace, Sidious paused mid-chant, eyes narrowing. A shiver coiled through him, thin, sharp, and wrong. The future blurred. Where once there had been a singular darkness, now another flame rose beside it. Not light, but not the same darkness either. His apprentice had changed something. In the shadows of the shuttle bay, Luke stood draped in black, silent beside his father. His eyes, once wide with wonder, now burned with something colder. Not hate, but clarity, conviction. He no longer questioned the Force. He would master it. Together they would tear down the rot of the Republic's memory. Together they would dethrone the Emperor. Not for power, not for vengeance, but for a new galaxy. One reborn not in the image of Jedi or Sith, but something else. Balance, perhaps, or dominion. The line grew thinner by the day, and so a different tale took root in the galaxy's marrow, one where the sun did not fall, because he had never risen. He had chosen, and the Force, once bright with prophecy, now trembled with uncertainty. For when the hand was extended, the boy took it. And the stars turned once more. Cloud City groaned beneath the weight of betrayal, its corridors convulsing with alarms as smoke curled through glass archways. The polished halls, once gleaming with opulence, now reflected only panic. Shadows of saboteurs and saviors tangled in desperate flight. Outside, the heavens wept lightning, clawing across the Bespin sky like the wrath of gods unheeded. Lando Calrissian's plan had unraveled in a heartbeat. Blaster fire stitched across the promenade as stormtroopers surged in renewed force, drowning hopes in white armor and red beams. Leia Organa's voice echoed through the storm, raw with anguish. "Luke, no!" But the name dissolved in thunder, lost beneath the roar of repulsor lifts and betrayal. Above them, TIE fighters rained down like vultures, their engines screaming in predatory unison. The Millennium Falcon bucked under the strain, shields flickering as Chewbacca roared defiance into the dark. What had been a rescue was now a retreat. What had been a rebellion, now a reckoning. And at the eye of the storm, Luke Skywalker stood bloodied and broken, but not alone. Vader's cape billowed behind him as he stepped onto the landing platform, rain slicing across his obsidian armor. His hand gripped Luke's arm, not in malice, but necessity. The boy was too weak to stand unaided, his saber lost, his spirit wavering. Lightning carved silhouettes against their forms, the fallen son and the blackened father joined by blood, by war, by destiny. "You chose this path," Luke whispered through grit teeth, barely conscious. "Why? Help me now!" Vader's voice, distorted through the vocoder, rumbled like the coming storm. "Because the path is not yet ended." Behind them, the Falcon's engines shrieked. Leia reached out from the boarding ramp, eyes wide with disbelief as she saw the pair approaching. together. No. No, that's not possible. Blasters flared again. Lando shouted for cover. R2-D2 beeped frantically, plugging into the docking controls to override the Falcon's descent. Vader did not flinch. With his free hand, he deflected a shot that could have ended them both. Luke sagged against him, his breathing ragged. There was no time left for division, no room for legacy, only survival. They crossed the final steps together, father and son, not as enemies, but fugitives from a war greater than either of them had imagined. As the Falcon lifted, TIE fighters swarmed like hornets, streaking fire through the clouds. Leia screamed into the void, reaching for what could not be understood. The air trembled with the weight of unmade choices. And in the hold, as the blast doors sealed, Vader lowered Luke gently to the floor. For the first time since Mustafar, his breathing was not a threat, but a tether. Outside, the storm howled on. Inside, silence reigned, thick with what might come next. Coruscant's skyline shimmered beneath a veil of shadow, the city world's luminous spires dimmed by the suffocating presence of the Imperial Citadel. Far beneath its obsidian crown, within a sanctum buried beneath durasteel and secrecy, the air pulsed with a quiet, sinister energy. It was here, in the hollowed heart of the Empire, that the transformation would begin. Not of a body ravaged by fire, but of a soul touched by hope, now slowly bending toward darkness. Luke Skywalker entered the chamber alone. The doors hissed shut behind him, sealing away the distant murmur of advisors and stormtroopers. The silence within was almost holy, temple-like in its vast emptiness. Pillars of black stone loomed like sentinels, and between them, a cracked viewport framed the stars in cruel beauty. Twilight bathed the room in shadows, interrupted only by the faint glimmer of Coruscant's ever-churning skyline and the steady thrum of the Force, pulsing low and cold like a tide beneath the floor. At the center of it all, seated upon a throne that rose from the floor like a jagged crown, sat Emperor Palpatine. Cloaked in black, his presence swallowed all light. The hood shadowed most of his face, but his eyes burned through the veil, yellow and knowing, as if they had always seen Luke coming. A smile crept across his withered lips, thin and precise. "You have done well, young Skywalker," he intoned, his voice a whisper that struck like thunder. "The Force trembles with your arrival." Luke did not answer. His lightsaber, reclaimed during the chaos of their escape from Bespin, hung inert at his belt. His eyes flicked to the viewport, to the stars beyond. How different they looked now. Distant, cold, indifferent. The memory of Leia's voice calling for him across the void still rang in his mind, but it felt like it came from a dream he was slowly forgetting. Palpatine rose. "Your father was strong," he said, descending the steps with an elegance that belied his age. But his true potential was only awakened when he abandoned the chains of sentiment. You too stand at that threshold. You felt it when you struck the trooper down to protect your father, when you turned your back on your friends. That power. Luke's jaw tightened. He dropped to one knee. The motion surprised even him. Fluid, unthinking. His heart pounded in the pause that followed, as though testing the weight of the choice just made. The Emperor stood before him now, a black sun eclipsing the stars. He reached forward, gnarled fingers brushing Luke's chin, lifting his face to meet his gaze. "Good," Palpatine breathed. "You are ready to understand." The chamber dimmed further as the walls themselves seemed to pulse in time with his words. The Emperor extended a hand, and Luke felt the air shift, tasting of metal, ash, and something far older. With a whisper, the Sith teachings began. He spoke of power, not as the Jedi knew it, but as truth, buried beneath centuries of fear. The Force is not peace, Palpatine said, pacing the edge of the viewport. It is dominion. It is knowing your will matters more than another's weakness. As he spoke, the galaxy seemed to turn outside the glass, the stars twisting ever so slightly, like prey caught in a snare. Luke listened, his brow furrowed not with confusion, but with focus. He had expected the dark to scream, to claw at him, to fill him with agony. Instead, it whispered, seductive, quiet, patient. Not a fire, but a tide. Palpatine showed him the threads of galactic control, the folly of the rebellion's idealism, the fragility of light. Each truth, once repelled, now nestled into the cracks left by his fear. Of failing, of loss, of death. And so he stayed, long into the artificial night, kneeling as the stars looked on, silent witnesses to the fall of a Jedi's sun. By dawn's first edge, when Coruscant's upper towers shimmered once more with light, Luke remained unmoved. The Emperor's shadow stretched long behind him, and somewhere deep in the Citadel's cold foundation, the legacy of Skywalker shifted, bending toward eclipse. The forge was silent, except for the steady hiss of plasma and the soft clink of metal against stone. In the center of the chamber, flames licked the air, their orange glow casting long shadows across the dark walls. A figure stood before the forge, the flicker of the flames dancing across his face, obscured beneath the hood of a new cloak. Black, void of the color that had once symbolized hope. Luke Skywalker no longer existed. His name, his identity, was now a ghost, fading into the Force, a forgotten echo in a life that had been rewritten in darkness. His hands trembled only slightly as he lifted the reforged hilt from the anvil. It felt heavier than it should have, as though the weight of it, of everything it represented, had become too much to bear. The red crystal burned in the heart of the saber, its unnatural glow pulsing with an intensity that matched the pulse of his heart. The blade, once a symbol of his family, of his father's redemption, now symbolized only one thing: his final surrender. The forge had done its work. The saber hilt, polished and gleaming with a sinister sheen, was perfect. It was the weapon of someone who had chosen to embrace power, not as a servant, but as its master. He had placed the red crystal within the hilt, feeling the hum of the Sith energy as it bled through him. It was as if the saber itself was calling him to leave behind everything that had been, and he had listened. "You have done well, my apprentice," came the Emperor's voice from behind him, colder than the night that enveloped them both. Luke turned to face him. His breath was shallow, but there was no hesitation now, no inner conflict, only the stillness of someone who had accepted the inevitable. The Emperor stood tall, his expression unreadable, his eyes gleaming with the satisfaction of seeing his newest creation, his heir, now standing in full. The Emperor's presence was almost tangible, like a weight pressing down on the room, bending the Force to his will. But Luke no longer flinched at it. His gaze fell to the weapon in his hand, the crimson glow casting dark lines across his face. Skywalker was a name of weakness, Luke whispered, almost to himself. The words tasted like ash in his mouth, but they felt right. A name that belonged to a past I no longer seek to remember. The Emperor's lips curled into a thin smile. "And so you shall be reborn, my apprentice. From this moment forth, You are no longer Luke Skywalker. You are Darth Aeon, a name forged in the shadow of the galaxy's eternity. The words, spoken with such finality, felt like a sealing of his fate. The old him, the boy from Tatooine who had dreamed of becoming a hero, was gone, replaced by something stronger, something darker, something that had been waiting to emerge since the moment he had first tasted the power of the dark side. Darth Aeon. The name settled on him like the weight of a mantle, heavy and inevitable. It resonated within him, vibrating through his chest, pulsing in the depths of his soul. Aeon, the eternal, the timeless. He had abandoned his lineage, his birthright, in favor of a new legacy, a legacy of destruction and ascension. The Emperor watched him carefully, waiting for the moment to pass, for the new Sith to be born in full. "Now, my apprentice," Palpatine's voice came low, full of dark promise. "You are ready. The galaxy awaits you. The time of the Jedi is over. The time of the Sith is at hand." Darth Aeon lifted the saber hilt, feeling the weight of it in his palm. The Force surged around him, but it no longer felt like a tether. It was a weapon, a tool to be shaped, controlled, and wielded. In the deepest part of his being, a cold satisfaction spread. He felt the years of torment, of doubt, of sacrifice dissolving. All that remained was the power, an unbroken path forward, free from the chains of his past. He ignited the saber, and the crimson blade hummed to life, a cruel, burning light cutting through the darkness of the chamber. The light was harsh, unfamiliar, a stark contrast to the gentle blue that had once graced his hand. It felt right. It felt like destiny. With a single motion, he spun the saber in his hand, the hum of the blade filling the room with a sinister song. He could hear the whispers of the dark side calling to him, urging him to embrace the path laid before him. The darkness no longer repelled him. It was him. The Emperor nodded in approval, his voice quiet, but filled with triumphant malice. "You are perfect, a true Sith." Darth Aeon stood tall, his eyes blazing with the fire of a new purpose. He had renounced his past, shed his former identity, and embraced the future. He was no longer Luke Skywalker. He was something far more dangerous, something the galaxy would never see coming. The heir to the Empire had risen, not in the image of a Jedi, but as a Sith Lord in the making. And so, as the blade of his saber swirled in the air, a new chapter began for him, one that would not be written in the stars, but in the blood of those who stood in his way. The shuttle descended swiftly, slicing through the atmosphere of the distant outer rim planet. Below, the landscape was a patchwork of dense forests, winding rivers, and small rebel encampments, scattered like scattered embers waiting to be extinguished. The mission was clear: eliminate the rebellion's foothold here. The Emperor had given his orders, and Aeon, Luke Skywalker's former self, would carry them out with ruthless efficiency. But even as the shuttle rumbled toward its destination, a part of him, distant and fading, felt a gnawing reluctance. He had never wanted this. He had never desired to be the agent of destruction, to be the harbinger of death. Yet here he was, his new identity, a symbol of the dark side, driving him forward, compelling him to fulfill the will of his master. It was inevitable, wasn't it? The shuttle's engines roared as it landed softly on the outskirts of a rebel base hidden deep within the forest. Aeon stood motionless, his hooded figure shrouded in black as he surveyed the surrounding trees. The very air seemed to pulse with the tension of battle, a stillness before the storm. The door of the shuttle slid open with a hiss, and Aeon stepped onto the soft, damp earth. His boots sank slightly into the wet ground, but his mind was sharp, his senses attuned to the Force. Every sound, every movement was amplified, as if the world itself was aware of his presence. He could feel the faint stirrings of the rebellion soldiers hiding within the trees, but they had no idea that death was already upon them. He reached out with the Force, searching for any sign of resistance. A moment of hesitation passed, a shadow of his former self peering through the mask he had forged. But it was fleeting. In the distance, he could sense the presence of a patrol, their movements cautious but unaware of his impending arrival. His eyes narrowed, and the hesitation was gone. The dark side surged through him, a rush of power that wiped away any remnants of doubt. The reluctance he had once felt, those fleeting thoughts of mercy, vanished in an instant. Now, there was only fury. With a single thought, the trees surrounding the patrol trembled, the air crackled, and the soldiers were flung violently through the air, their bodies crashing into the trunks of the trees like rag dolls. They screamed in terror, but it was too late. Aeon was already upon them. His saber ignited in a blaze of crimson, a scarlet light that split the forest's gloom. The soldiers scrambled to their feet, raising their blasters, but they were no match for the power he wielded. With a swift motion, Aeon lashed out with the Force, hurling the soldiers aside like mere insects. Their weapons scattered, their cries falling silent as their bodies slammed into the earth, lifeless. The forest around him was alive with energy, crackling, burning, twisting under his command. He could hear the distant sounds of the rebel base reacting to the assault. The warning alarms blared, but it was too late. The fear had already taken root. A flicker of hesitation rose within him once again, but this time it was swiftly crushed by the dark side. He could feel its power gnawing at him, urging him to annihilate, to destroy, to finish what he had started. He moved deeper into the heart of the base, his presence felt by every soldier within its walls. His mind was an unrelenting storm, and the Force surged with every step he took. The buildings, wooden and makeshift, were no match for his fury. He raised his hand, and the very ground trembled beneath him as an explosion ripped through the center of the camp, the force of it throwing debris in all directions. The rebels fought back, but it was futile. They were shadows in the face of his rage, nothing more than prey. He reached out again, his fury coursing through him like wildfire, and the camp's defenses crumbled before his will. In a matter of minutes, the rebel outpost was in ruins, smoke rising into the sky as the forest around it burned. The crackling of flames filled the air, mingling with the distant cries of those who had fallen in the wake of his wrath. Trees were lit aflame, their leaves curling and blackening as they collapsed into the earth. Aeon stood amidst the destruction, breathing heavily, his saber still burning bright in his hand. His eyes, cold, devoid of mercy, scanned the devastation he had wrought. The hesitation was gone. There was no more reluctance. There was only power. As the last remnants of the rebel outpost burned around him, Aeon's mind was clear. This was who he was now. Luke Skywalker was dead, and in his place, Darth Aeon had been born, more powerful than any Jedi, stronger than any fear. He had become the embodiment of the darkness he had once fought against. The dark side consumed him completely, leaving nothing behind but the fury of a Sith Lord, and the galaxy would tremble at the name of Darth Aeon. He turned from the flames, his cloak swirling behind him as he walked away from the wreckage. The Emperor's command had been fulfilled, but it was only the beginning. There would be more battles, more destruction to come. The rebellion would be crushed, and the Empire would reign supreme. And Aeon would be the one to ensure that no force, no matter how strong, could stand in its way. For the galaxy had forgotten hope, and now it would learn to fear the wrath of Darth Aeon. The stars gleamed through the small hut on Dagobah, the thick air of the swamp outside mixing with the croaks of distant creatures. Inside, Leia Organa knelt, her mind deep in the Force. Weeks had passed since the last transmission from the rebellion, and the weight of the silence was suffocating. But there was something more pressing, a presence in the Force, once familiar and comforting, now twisted and dark. Luke's presence was fading, like a star consumed by shadow, and the bond they once shared felt distant. It was as if a part of her soul had been torn away. The agony of that loss was overwhelming. But beneath it, she sensed something else, a connection she could not ignore. Luke was still there, but he was no longer the brother she had known. He had become something else, something terrifying. Through the Force, she felt the echoes of his transformation. The light that once defined him had turned to a burning red, tainted by the dark side. In that void, she felt the last remnants of the brother she loved. The realization struck her like a physical blow. Luke was lost, consumed by darkness, and she couldn't save him. Leia rose abruptly, wiping away the tears that stung her eyes. A fire ignited within her, a quiet resolve. She had to face this, whatever it took. Her brother was lost, but the galaxy still needed hope. She had to honor his legacy, even if it meant walking the Jedi path alone. "Master Yoda," Leia whispered, turning to the ancient Jedi Master in the corner of the room, his eyes half closed in meditation. Yoda had guided her through the ways of the Force, but her training had only just begun. She was determined to grow strong enough to fight the darkness that had consumed Luke, but the grief weighed heavily on her heart. Yoda's presence was a constant reminder that her journey had only just begun. "Ready, you are not." Yoda's voice was soft yet resolute, a reflection of his centuries of wisdom. Leia turned to face him, her gaze steady. "I have to be," she said, her voice unwavering despite the pain. "The galaxy needs me, and I need to stop the darkness that's consuming Luke." Yoda's gaze softened as he studied her, the weight of the years reflected in his eyes. He knew the struggle she faced, the same struggle that had broken countless Jedi before her. But there was no denying the strength within her. She had an unyielding will, tempered by the loss of the one she loved most. "Face your fears. You must," Yoda continued, his voice filled with quiet wisdom. "The path of the Jedi. Not easy it is, but strong in you. The Force is." Leia nodded slowly. She knew it was true. To become a Jedi was to face darkness, to walk the line between light and shadow. But there was no choice. She had to stand against the dark side, even if it meant confronting her deepest fears. The old master rose slowly, his frail form moving with the grace of someone who had seen millennia pass. He reached for the small, weathered lightsaber hanging from his belt and extended it to Leia. "This, the last of its kind, is," Yoda said softly, "a weapon of the Jedi. Your journey, it begins with this." Leia took the saber in her hands. The hilt was worn smooth from years of use. A relic of the past, a symbol of a time when the Jedi weren't hunted, when the light side still had a place in the galaxy. She activated the blade. The blue glow illuminated the room, casting light on her reflection in the blade's surface. For a moment, she saw not just the woman before the Master, but the woman who had once been a princess, a leader, a sister. The saber hummed softly. Leia took a deep breath, steadying herself. This was her path, one that could lead her to the dark side, to Luke, or perhaps to something entirely new. "I will not fail," Leia whispered, her voice filled with determination. "I will bring balance to the Force." Yoda nodded, his eyes gleaming with something akin to pride. "Yes, hope, you are. The last hope of the Jedi you may be, but strong in you, the light side still is." Leia tightened her grip on the saber. The weight of her destiny settled on her shoulders. She would face the darkness, not as a Skywalker, but as herself. The fall of one brother had marred her family's legacy, but she would rise to protect the light and honor the Jedi. With that, Leia Organa, the last hope of the Jedi, set foot on a path that would change the galaxy forever. The Death Star's corridors hummed with a cold, mechanical rhythm. The scent of metal and ozone filled the air, reminding all that the Empire's grip on the galaxy was absolute. In this fortress of darkness, Palpatine watched with cold amusement as two figures at the heart of his empire, Darth Vader and his son, Luke Skywalker, unwittingly danced to his manipulations. Vader stood in the observation room, his towering figure casting a long shadow over the training chamber below. His helmet reflected the flickering lights, red eyes watching Luke's every move. The boy had grown stronger, but Vader couldn't shake the unease in his chest. Luke was becoming powerful, but the way he wielded the Force unsettled Vader. His strikes were fierce, but lacked the controlled precision a true Sith should possess. There was something wild, almost desperate in Luke's movements, like he was trying to outrun something. Vader's thoughts were interrupted by the rasp of his breathing, filling the space around him. He watched Luke train with increasing intensity, a raw energy fueling his every motion. Luke's power was undeniable, but there was no calmness, no mastery. The Emperor's influence on the boy was unmistakable, pushing him toward a destiny Vader could no longer control. The silence of the Death Star was broken by the familiar voice of Palpatine in Vader's mind. "The boy grows too powerful, Lord Vader. Soon, he will eclipse you. You must decide which is more important, your loyalty to me, or your desire to reclaim what you have lost." Vader clenched his fists, the rage within him flaring. The idea of losing his son, of watching Luke slip further into Palpatine's grip, cut deeper than any wound. He had already been manipulated by the Emperor, twisted into something he could no longer control. Was his son doomed to the same fate? Turning his gaze back to Luke, Vader saw only a shadow of the boy he had hoped to save. Luke was powerful, yes, but also naive, unaware of the true danger he was in. And the Emperor? The Emperor was always watching, always whispering in Luke's ear, guiding him down a path of no return. The boy will either join you in ruling the galaxy, or he will be destroyed. It is the way of the Sith. Vader's thoughts spiraled, torn between his love for his son and the bitter truth that Palpatine was right. The dark side had already claimed him, just as it had claimed Vader all those years ago. Could he save Luke, or was he already lost to the darkness? Suddenly, the sound of footsteps behind him broke his contemplation. Palpatine, his thin face bathed in the harsh light, appeared in the doorway, a predatory smile playing on his lips. "Lord Vader," Palpatine purred, his voice like honey. "Your son is growing stronger, isn't he?" Vader's jaw clenched. "He is." The Emperor's eyes gleamed. "It won't be long before he surpasses you. Perhaps it's time to show him the true power of the dark side. You, my dear Vader, must teach him." Vader's fists tightened at the Emperor's words. The message was clear. Luke would either kill Vader or become the Emperor's new apprentice. The Sith rule of two dictated it. Only one could rule. Palpatine had his plan, and it was already in motion. Vader stared down at Luke, his son, training with such intensity. The boy was becoming a weapon of the Emperor, but still, something in his heart rebelled against the idea of destroying him. Could he betray his son, the last piece of Padmé left in the galaxy? Or would he be the one to turn on the Emperor first? The tension was unbearable. The ultimate battle, Vader realized, wasn't between father and son. It was between him and the Emperor. Each was scheming to overthrow the other, each plotting betrayal. Palpatine had used Vader for years. But now, Vader saw the trap that was closing around his son. The Death Star was built on betrayal, and soon it would tear apart under its weight. The stage was set, and soon all would have to choose their sides. The Emperor and Vader, father and son. One would rise. One would fall. Leia stood at the entrance of the ruined Jedi temple, her pulse quickening. The echoes of an ancient order whispered through the shattered walls, but the air was heavy with something far darker now. Luke, her brother, her flesh and blood, had long since walked a different path, one away from the light. Luke stood amidst the crumbling remnants of the Jedi's past, his silhouette dark against the scattered fragments of statues and shattered relics. The air crackled with tension, a clash of destinies set to unfold. His expression was unreadable, but Leia saw the storm behind his eyes, the internal war that raged within him. "You've come," Luke said softly, his voice like velvet but carrying an edge. "I knew you would, Leia. You were always meant to." Leia's hand tightened around her lightsaber, the weight of it grounding her. She had never wanted this confrontation, but the Force had spoken clearly. Her brother had become something different, a dark reflection of what he could have been. She had trained for this moment, but she never imagined it would end like this. "You're still my brother," she said, her voice quivering despite her resolve. "It's not too late, Luke. There's still light in you. I know it." Luke's lips curled in a bitter smile. "Light? There is no light, Leia, only power. The Force doesn't care about the so-called light or dark. It's a tool, something to wield, something to control." His gaze hardened. "You should have joined me, but you chose this futile resistance." Leia's heart ached at his words. This wasn't the brother she remembered. The one who laughed beneath twin suns. The one who still had hope in the galaxy. The one who fought for something greater than himself. But the darkness had consumed him, twisted his vision of the Force into something unrecognizable. "I'll never join you," Leia said firmly. "The darkness has consumed you, but it hasn't consumed me. There's still a chance, Luke. Please." Luke's lightsaber flickered to life with a snap hiss, the red blade casting an ominous glow. "You were always too idealistic, Leia. The galaxy needs strength, not ideals." Before she could respond, Luke lunged forward, his blade clashing against hers with a violent spark. The battle was upon them, sister and brother locked in a duel of wills. Each strike was heavy with the weight of their shared past, the bond between them feeling like a distant echo as they fought. Every movement was swift, precise, but filled with an unmistakable sense of sorrow. Leia parried Luke's strike, stepping back to gain some distance. The ground beneath their feet was littered with broken pieces of their history, the remnants of a once unified purpose. With each passing second, she could feel her brother slipping further away. "Why won't you see?" Luke's voice was strained, his fury evident as he pressed the attack. "I could give you everything. Power, control, freedom from all this weakness." "I don't want power like that, Luke," Leia retorted, deflecting another blow. "I want you back. The galaxy doesn't need more of the darkness you've become. We need hope, unity, light." Luke's expression faltered for the briefest of moments. For an instant, Leia thought she saw a flicker of the brother she once knew. But the darkness quickly returned, clouding his gaze. With a roar, he intensified his assault, each strike more vicious than the last. Leia moved to parry, but Luke was too fast. His blade caught her arm, sending a shock of pain through her body. She staggered back, her grip on her lightsaber faltering for a moment, but the pain only steeled her resolve. She couldn't give up, not now. With a final, desperate surge, Leia launched herself at Luke, her blade clashing against his in a powerful explosion of light and shadow. The echoes of their battle reverberated through the temple's ruins, the remnants of the Jedi Order watching in silence.
As their blades met one last time, Leia's voice was barely a whisper in the chaos, but it carried all the weight of her heart.
"Luke, please, remember who you are."
For the briefest of moments, there was hesitation in his eyes. Just a flicker. But it was gone as quickly as it came. The duel continued, the line between light and dark growing ever thinner. The remnants of the Emperor's citadel lay smouldering in the ruins of Coruscant, a shattered monument to the power once wielded by Sidious. Luke Skywalker stood at the center of the wreckage, the heat of the burning citadel licking at the air around him. He had done it. He had defeated Palpatine. The dark tyrant who had once ruled the galaxy was gone, his twisted reign ended by the son of Anakin Skywalker. Yet, victory felt hollow. Sidious's death was not the triumphant moment Luke had imagined. The power, the darkness he had tasted in his duel with the Emperor, still clung to him, feeding something deep within. He looked down at his lightsaber, the blade flickering red in his grasp, the dark crystal he had forged still pulsing with the fury of the Force. The galaxy had changed, but so had Luke. A whisper echoed in the back of his mind, the temptation of what could be. The chance to reshape the galaxy, to leave behind the ashes of the Empire and the scattered remnants of the rebellion. Together with his father, the Empire could rise anew. But it would not be the Empire of Sidious, nor of the Republic that had failed. It would be a new order, built on power, control, and strength. Luke's eyes turned to the distant horizon, where the twin suns of Tatooine set in a sky of fading light. His father, Darth Vader, stood beside him, the dark figure a constant presence in his life now. The father who had fallen, who had been redeemed, but who, like his son, had embraced the power of the dark side. "I did what you asked," Luke said softly, his voice carrying the weight of their shared path. "Sidious is dead. The Empire is ours." Vader's helmeted head turned toward him, the darkness of his presence filling the space between them. "The galaxy will bow before us, my son," But it is not enough to simply defeat the Emperor. We must show them the strength of the Skywalker legacy. Luke stood tall, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. He had fought so hard to find balance, to reject the darkness that had consumed his father. But now, with the Emperor gone, what was left? Could there truly be peace without order? Was the galaxy ready to embrace the new empire they would build? "The Force is ours to wield, Father," Luke said, his tone darkening. "Together, we can reshape everything. We will bring an end to the rebellion and restore order to the galaxy." Vader's breath, harsh and mechanical, seemed to grow louder in the quiet of the ruined citadel. "The rebellion is weak. The galaxy will need more than rebellion to survive. It will need structure, discipline, leadership, and the Skywalkers will provide that." Luke turned to face his father fully, the twin thrones that awaited them in the heart of the galaxy looming large in his mind. The throne of the Emperor was empty, but another throne, the one he would share with his father, was already waiting, carved in the image of the Skywalker legacy. The path ahead was clear. The stars beyond the broken citadel pulsed, lines of hyperspace routes glowing red as they connected the worlds of the galaxy, marking the borders of their new empire. It was no longer just a matter of ruling. It was about reshaping, about remaking everything according to their vision. And in that vision, Luke saw the future, no longer divided between light and dark, but unified under the banner of the Skywalker dynasty. Together, father and son would rule, and they would carve a new order from the ashes of the old. "You will be by my side," Luke said, his voice filled with certainty. "The galaxy will remember our names. We will be more than rulers. We will be legends." Vader's dark form shifted beside him, and though his face remained hidden behind the mask, Luke could feel the approval in his presence. The dark side had shaped them both, and together they would lead the galaxy into a new age. As the hyperspace routes pulsed with the rhythm of the galaxy's heartbeat, Luke and Vader stood side by side, the twin thrones waiting for them. The rise of the Skywalker Empire had begun. The galaxy was theirs to command.